My name's Daisy, and this is the story of how I learned that family isn't always blood, and sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I came into this world as an unwelcome surprise to my parents, fresh out of college with stars in their eyes and careers on their minds. When my mom found out she was pregnant, she wanted an abortion. It wasn't the right time, they weren't ready, all that jazz. But my grandparents had other ideas. See, they were loaded, and they'd been bankrolling my parents' lives. When they caught wind of the pregnancy, they laid down the law: have the baby, or kiss the gravy train goodbye. From day one, I was an afterthought. My mom couldn't wait to get back to work, leaving me with a revolving door of nannies and my grandmothers. Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the care they gave me, but it wasn't the same as having real parents. As I grew older, my grandparents started to back off. They'd done their duty, keeping me alive and all, and now they were off to enjoy their golden years in exotic locales. Can't blame them, I guess. But it left me even more alone. By the time I was 7, I was practically raising myself. I knew how to cook basic meals, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school. It wasn't ideal, but it was my normal. Then, everything changed. My mom got pregnant again. This time, it was different. My parents were ready, excited even. They'd climbed the corporate ladder, made names for themselves. Now they could afford to be parents, or so they thought. When my sister was born, it was like the sun had finally risen in our house. My parents were over the moon, cooing and fawning over her like she was made of gold. And I was pushed even further into the shadows. As the years went by, the difference in how we were treated became more and more obvious. My sister got the best of everything: toys, clothes, attention. If she wanted something, she got it. If she did something wrong, it was brushed off with a laugh and a kids will be kids. Me? I learned not to ask for things. I wore hand-me-downs and made do with what I had. If I screwed up, it was met with disappointment and lectures about responsibility. Don't get me wrong, we weren't poor. Far from it. My parents were doing well, really well. But in their eyes, I was already grown, already independent. Why waste money on me when my sister needed it more? I threw myself into my studies. If I couldn't have their love, I'd have their respect. I got top grades, joined every club I could, stayed out of trouble. But it was never enough. They'd nod absently when I showed them my report card, then turn back to my sister's finger-painting masterpiece. By the time high school rolled around, I was counting the days until I could leave. I applied to colleges in secret, not telling my parents until I'd already been accepted. When I finally got into one of the best colleges, I packed my bags and left without a word. It took them 3 days to notice I was gone. 3 whole days. And even then, it was only because my mom wanted some yogurt. When she called, her voice was casual, like she was asking about the weather. "Daisy, could you pick up some low-calorie yogurt from the health food store on your way home?" I almost laughed. Here I was, starting a new chapter of my life, and all she cared about was yogurt. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not at home. I've been at college for 3 days now. I'm living in the dorms." There was a moment of silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to process this information. Then, without a hint of remorse or concern, she said, "Oh. Well, if you come back, you'll have to stay at a hotel. We've given your room to your sister." Life at college was a breath of fresh air. But money was tight. My parents didn't offer any financial support. But my grandparents, bless their hearts, came through for me. They sent me small amounts regularly, just enough to keep me afloat. It wasn't much, but it meant everything to me. Not just the money, but the fact that someone in my family actually cared. "Daisy, dear," my grandmother would say during our infrequent phone calls, "we're so proud of you. You focus on your studies, all right? Don't worry about anything else." Those words were like a balm to my soul. I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor, determined not to let them down. I couldn't work part-time like many of my classmates, the course load was too heavy, and I was determined to excel. So I pinched pennies, lived on ramen more often than not, and made every cent count. Meanwhile, life back home continued without me. My sister, the golden child, was struggling in school. Not that it mattered to my parents, they hired the best tutors money could buy, showered her with rewards for the slightest improvement, and made excuses for her every failure. By my senior year, companies were already lining up to recruit me. My professors sang my praises, my resume was impeccable, and I had my pick of job offers. But none of them felt quite right. I wanted more. I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe, just maybe, to my family, that I could make it on my own terms. So I took a leap of faith. I applied to a prestigious international company in Europe. It was a long shot, but I figured I had nothing to lose. When the acceptance email came, I nearly fell out of my chair. This was it. My ticket to a new life, a fresh start. I graduated with honors, my grandparents beaming proudly in the audience. My parents? They sent a generic congratulations card. My sister didn't even bother with that. But I didn't care. I was beyond seeking their approval. As I packed my bags for Europe, I thought about calling my parents to say goodbye. In the end, I decided against it. What was there to say? They'd made it clear where I stood in their lives. Instead, I hugged my grandparents tight, promising to call and write often. Life in Europe was everything I'd hoped for and more. Every now and then, I'd call my parents. Old habits die hard, I guess. But each conversation was like pulling teeth. They'd give monosyllabic answers, always too busy or too distracted to really talk. And they never, not once, called me. Then I met Marco. He was in the marketing department, all charm and quick wit, with a smile that could light up a room. We started as colleagues, became friends, and before I knew it, we were falling in love. When Marco proposed on a moonlit beach in Positano, I didn't hesitate. We decided to have the wedding in Italy. We should go tell your parents in person, Marco said one night as we pored over wedding plans. And invite them properly. It's the right thing to do. So we flew back to the States, armed with wedding invitations and hope. Foolish hope, as it turned out. From the moment we walked into my childhood home, it was clear we weren't welcome. My parents were cold, distracted. They barely looked at Marco, barely acknowledged our news. "Oh, that's nice," my mother said, her eyes on her phone. "We're terribly busy though. Your sister's new apartment needs work, and we're overseeing the renovations." We stayed for a week. A long, uncomfortable week. My parents were hardly ever home, always at my sister's new place. But my sister? She was always around, always watching, always there. I saw the way she looked at Marco. The flutter of her eyelashes, the coy smiles. It made my stomach churn. "Marco," she cooed one evening, "I'd love your opinion on the color scheme for my bedroom. Why don't you come up and take a look?" I saw the discomfort on Marco's face. "I don't think," he started, but I cut him off. "That's enough," I snapped at my sister. "He's my fiancé. Back off." Her face crumpled into a pout. "I was just being friendly," she whined. "God, Daisy, you're so selfish. You always want everything for yourself." She stormed off, no doubt to cry to our parents. And sure enough, not 10 minutes later, my mother was there, face like thunder. "How dare you speak to your sister that way," she hissed. "After all we've done for you." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "All you've done for me? That's a joke, right? You've done nothing but ignore me my entire life." But it was useless. In their eyes, I was always going to be the villain. The unwanted child who dared to want more. That night, as Marco and I lay in bed in a nearby hotel, because of course, my old room was now a home gym for my sister, I made a decision. "Let's go home," I said softly. "Back to Italy. This isn't my home anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. Marco pulled me close, his warmth a comfort in the cold reality of my family's indifference. "Okay," he said simply. "Let's go home." As we boarded the plane the next day, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief to be leaving the toxicity behind, sadness for the family I never really had. Back in Italy, life slowly returned to normal. Marco and I threw ourselves into wedding planning, determined to create the perfect day. But the visit home had left a bitter taste in my mouth, a reminder of all I'd left behind. "Are you sure about this?" Marco asked one evening as we sat on our balcony, the sun setting over the Tuscan hills. "Not inviting your sister, I mean." I took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor roll over my tongue before answering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said finally. "After what happened. I can't have her there, Marco. I won't." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. What I didn't tell him was about the messages. The explicit, inappropriate messages my sister had been sending him on social media since we'd left. I'd seen them by accident one day when using his phone. He'd been too embarrassed, too kind to tell me. But I knew. And it was the final straw. 6 months flew by in a whirlwind of cake tastings, venue visits, and dress fittings. Before I knew it, we were just weeks away from the big day. There was just one last thing to do. With a deep breath, I picked up the phone and dialed the number I still knew by heart, even after all these years. "Oh, Daisy. What is it?" "We're rather busy at the moment." My mother's voice, distracted as always. I swallowed hard, pushing down the hurt. "I'm calling about the wedding. I booked your flights and hotel. Everything's paid for. We'd love for you and Dad to come." There was a pause, then, "That's nice, dear. But what about your sister?" "We haven't received an invitation for her." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "She's not invited, Mom. After what happened during our visit, and the messages she's been sending Marco. I don't want her there." "Messages? What messages?" My mother's voice had an edge to it now. "The explicit ones, Mom. The ones she's been sending my fiancé. It's inappropriate and disrespectful. I won't have that drama at my wedding." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in my mother's head, trying to find a way to excuse my sister's behavior, to make me the bad guy once again. "I don't know what you're talking about. Your sister would never do such a thing. Daisy, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. For once in my life, I'm putting myself first. You and Dad are welcome to come. The flight details will be emailed to you. I hope you'll be there." She didn't say anything and just hung up. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and beautiful. Everything was perfect, the flowers, the music, the food. Everything except for the 2 empty seats in the front row. As the hours ticked by and guests began to arrive, a knot formed in my stomach. Where were they? Surely they couldn't do that to me. "Marco," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Can we delay the ceremony a bit? I need to make a call." His eyes filled with understanding and sympathy. "Of course, amore. Take all the time you need." With shaking hands, I dialed my mother's number. It rang, and rang, and rang. Just as I was about to give up, there was a click. "Hello?" My mother's voice, groggy and irritated. "Mom, where are you? The wedding's about to start." There was a pause, then, "Daisy? Do you have any idea what time it is here?" "We were sleeping. It's the middle of the night." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Sleeping? But the wedding. You were supposed to be here. I sent you the tickets, the hotel information, everything." "Oh, that." Her voice turned cold. "Well, we decided not to come. Your sister is having her housewarming party today. We couldn't miss that." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her housewarming? But she's known about my wedding date for months. Why would she schedule it for today? Don't be selfish, Daisy. The world doesn't revolve around you. Besides, how could you expect us to go to one daughter's celebration and not the others? If you had invited your sister like you should have. Mom, I cut her off, my voice hard. You know why I didn't invite her? After what she did. That's all in your head, Daisy. Your sister would never do such a thing. You've always been jealous of her, always trying to make her look bad. I laughed, a bitter sound. Jealous? Is that what you think this is about? God, Mom, do you even hear yourself? Don't take that tone with me, young lady. This is your own fault. Your sister's party is none of my business, I finished for her. Just like my wedding is clearly none of yours. Goodbye, Mom. Enjoy the party. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. I looked at myself in the mirror, took a deep breath, and made a decision. And so, I walked down the aisle alone. No father to give me away, no mother to shed a tear. But as I looked at Marco, standing there with love shining in his eyes, I realized I didn't need them. I had everything I needed right here. Time has a way of healing wounds, or at least numbing them. Marco and I built a life together, full of love, laughter, and success. We'd both climbed the corporate ladder, our hard work paying off in promotions and accolades. We traveled, we made friends, we created a home. My parents never reached out. No congratulations on our wedding, no holiday greetings, nothing. And after a while, I stopped expecting them to. I stopped checking my phone on my birthday, stopped hoping for a Christmas card. It was easier that way. Then, on a random Tuesday in April, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a very familiar area code. My hometown. Hello? I answered, my heart pounding. Daisy, is that you? My mother's voice, sounding older, more tired than I remembered. Daisy, we need your help. And so the story came out. The company my parents had worked for, the one they'd sacrificed everything for, including their relationship with me, had gone bankrupt. They were out of work, with no savings to fall back on. We've always lived well, you know that, my mother said, a note of desperation in her voice. We know we haven't been good parents to you. But we need help, please. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring inside me. Anger at their past treatment, satisfaction at their comeuppance, pity for their situation, and a small, traitorous spark of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment they'd finally see me, value me. Okay, I said finally. I'll help. How much do you need? The figure she named made me wince, but I could afford it. Marco and I had done well for ourselves, after all. I made the transfer immediately, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest. It's done, I told her. The money should be in your account soon. Over the next few months, the pattern continued. Text messages would arrive, always asking for money. The amounts were smaller now, but the requests were frequent. And every time, like a fool, I sent the money. After one such transaction, Marco found me staring at my phone, a wry smile on my face. They asked for money again, he asked gently. I nodded. And again, I sent it. God, when did I become such a sucker? Marco sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You're not a sucker, amore. You're kind. It's not your fault they can't see what an amazing daughter they have. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when my world tilted on its axis once again. I was idly scrolling through Facebook, a cup of coffee in hand, when a photo stopped me cold. My parents, looking tanned and relaxed, cocktails in hand, lounging by a pool at what was clearly a very expensive resort. My hand shook as I clicked through more photos. There they were, dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant. Posing in front of a luxury spa. Living it up like they didn't have a care in the world. Like they hadn't been begging me for money for months. With a growing sense of dread, I navigated to my sister's page. What I saw there made my blood run cold. Photo after photo of her with a brand new sports car, at high-end bars, designer shopping bags piled around her. And the captions. Another amazing gift from the best parents in the world. Lucky me, only child. So blessed to have parents who would do anything for me. Spoiled and proud. And there, in the comments, were my parents. Liking every post. Commenting things like, nothing but the best for our little princess, and you deserve it all, sweetheart. I felt sick. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering to the floor. How could they? How dare they? As if on cue, my phone started ringing. It was them. With a deep breath, I answered. Daisy, dear, my mother's voice dripped with fake sweetness. We were wondering when you might be sending the next transfer. Life's been so hard, you know. We're thinking of renovating the house, it's gotten so old and dreary. Something in me snapped. Hard? I've seen the photos, Mom. The resort, the restaurants, the gifts for my sister. How dare you? There was a pause, then my mother's voice turned cold. Now you listen here, we gave you life. I could have had an abortion, you know. But we chose to have you. You owe us everything. Now, about that money. I didn't let her finish. I hung up, my whole body shaking with rage and hurt. The phone immediately started ringing again. And again, and again. Text messages flooded in, alternating between guilt trips and demands. I turned the phone off. Over the next few weeks, my parents continued to call and message. Demanding money, then pleading, then threatening. I ignored it all. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, cut off every avenue they had to reach me. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, of guilt. But every time I wavered, I remembered those photos, those comments. The cruel words my mother had spat at me. Years passed, and life continued to evolve. Marco and I had built a successful life in Europe, but something was calling us back to the States. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was the desire to start a family of our own in familiar surroundings. Whatever the reason, we made the decision to return to my hometown. We quickly settled into our new life. A quaint house in a quiet neighborhood, prestigious jobs that challenged and excited us, and plans for the family we hoped to start soon. It felt like everything was finally falling into place. One afternoon, while having coffee with an old school friend, I learned about the dramatic turn of events in my estranged family's life. Did you hear about your sister's party? My friend asked, her eyes wide with gossip. I shook my head, bracing myself for whatever came next. It was wild, she continued. After everyone left, she fell asleep while smoking in bed. The whole house went up in flames. Your sister made it out, but the house, it's gone, Daisy. Completely destroyed. I sat there, stunned. The house I grew up in, the site of so many conflicting memories, reduced to ashes because of my sister's carelessness. That's not even the worst part, my friend added. Turns out your parents let the insurance lapse. They've lost everything. A part of me felt a twinge of satisfaction, quickly followed by guilt for feeling that way. But mostly, I felt nothing. They had made their choices, just as I had made mine. Life went on. Marco and I focused on our careers, our home, our future. Then, one sunny Saturday morning, a knock on the door changed everything. I opened it to find my parents standing there. They looked older, worn down. The designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair were gone, replaced by shabby, outdated outfits and graying, unkempt locks. Daisy, my mother said, her voice trembling. We need your help. I stood there, frozen, as they poured out their tale of woe. Living in a cramped, rented apartment. Struggling to make ends meet. No savings, no support from their own parents, unable to find work at their age. And your sister, my father added, his voice bitter. We asked to stay with her, in the apartment we bought her. She kicked us out. Said she didn't have room for old people. A part of me wanted to laugh at the irony. The golden child, turning on them just as they had turned on me. But the laugh died in my throat as I looked at their desperate faces. "Please, Daisy," my mother pleaded. "We have nowhere else to go. You're our only hope." For a moment, I was tempted. The little girl inside me, the one who had always craved their love and approval, wanted to throw open the door and welcome them in. But then, "You owe us this," my mother said, her tone shifting from pleading to demanding. "After all, I could have aborted you. You owe us your life." And just like that, the spell was broken. I felt a calm settle over me, a certainty I had never known before. "No," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I don't owe you anything. Not for giving birth to me, not for the years of neglect, not for choosing my sister over me time and time again. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. Now, I'm asking you to leave. If you don't, I'll call the police." My father tried to step forward, but I stood my ground. "I mean it," I said. "Leave. Now. And don't come back." They left, hurling insults and threats as they went. I closed the door, leaning against it as tears finally came. Not tears of sadness or regret, but of relief. Of closure. That night, I called my grandparents. They had always been there for me, even from a distance. They listened as I poured out the whole story, offering words of comfort and support. "You did the right thing, Daisy," my grandmother said. "You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Especially those who wouldn't even notice if you burned." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The last ties to my toxic past had been severed. The future stretched out before me, bright and full of possibility.
Hey there, I'm Amanda, a 28-year-old event planner with a knack for turning chaos into unforgettable moments. Right now, I'm standing in my office surrounded by mood boards and color swatches when my phone buzzes. It's Mom, calling yet again to discuss wedding cake flavors. "Honey, are you sure you don't want to try the lavender lemon? It's unique," she says, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. I can't help but smile. "Mom, you know John's allergic to lavender. Let's stick with classic vanilla, okay?" That's my mom, Lisa, always looking out for me. We've been as close as thieves ever since I can remember, and she's the reason I got into event planning in the first place. Watching her throw amazing birthday parties for me as a kid lit a spark that turned into my passion. Speaking of sparks, let me tell you about John. We met during a disastrous corporate event I was managing. The DJ had bailed, the catering was late, and I was one meltdown away from crying into the table centerpieces. Just then, this tall, calm guy strolled up and asked, "Need a hand?" Turns out he's a tech wizard, and within minutes, he had the sound system up and running. We've been inseparable ever since. Now, we're planning our own big day, and I couldn't be more excited. But there's this nagging feeling I can't shake, and it's all tied to my grandmother, Catherine. Heading to see Catherine today. My best friend Megan asks over the phone, her voice crackling. "Need me to come? I can run interference if she starts grilling you." "Nah, it's just to drop off the wedding invite," I reply, trying to sound more confident than I feel. But as I pull up to Catherine's house, my cousin Stephen, who's fixing her porch swing, gives me a look that says, "You know what you're walking into." Inside, Catherine is holding court from her favorite armchair. "Amanda, dear, come closer," she beckons, and I hand her the invite, keeping my tone light. "Big day's coming up, Grandma. Wouldn't be complete without you there." Her eyes narrow as she takes the envelope. "Yes, I suppose it wouldn't. Have you considered wearing your hair up? It would show off your unique features." There it is, that subtle but unmistakable critique. I force a smile. "Thanks for the tip, Grandma. I'll think about it." As I leave, her parting words linger ominously. Family's a funny thing, isn't it? Full of surprises. The unsettling vibe sticks with me, but for now, I focus on planning a wedding that's nearly perfect. Nearly because that feeling of unease refuses to fade. The big day arrives, and I'm a mess of nerves and excitement. My dress fits like a glove, and the venue looks like a fairy tale come to life. Megan gushes as she adjusts my veil. "Amanda, you look absolutely stunning." "Thanks, Meg," I say, my voice shaking. I can't believe it's finally happening. Just then, Mom peeks her head into the bridal suite. "Honey, your grandmother's here. She's asking to see you." I frown. Already, the ceremony doesn't start for another hour. Still, I step out to greet Catherine, who looks strangely unsettled. Amanda, dear, she says, fidgeting with her purse. Before everything begins, have you ever felt like you didn't quite belong in this family? Grandma, what are you talking about? This isn't the time for. Just answer the question, dear. Exasperated, I sigh. No, I've always felt like I belonged. Can we please focus on the wedding? She nods, but there's a glint in her eye that sends a shiver down my spine. Of course, dear. The ceremony begins, and as I walk down the aisle, John's smile calms my nerves. Everything feels perfect, until a voice cuts through the air. Stop this wedding. A woman stands at the back, tall and elegant, her face a mask of anguish. I'm sorry, but I can't keep quiet any longer. Amanda, I'm your real mother. The crowd gasps, and it feels like the ground has been ripped out from under me. What? No, that's impossible. My mom, Lisa, jumps to her feet, her face pale. What is the meaning of this? She looks at me, her voice steady despite the chaos. Amanda, we'll figure this out, together. I nod numbly, unable to speak. Through the commotion, I notice Catherine. Unlike everyone else, she isn't shocked. Instead, she wears a smug smile. Realization dawns on me. Grandma, I whisper. Before I could confront her, Megan and Stephen were suddenly at my side. Amanda, this is insane. Something's not right here, Stephen said, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Megan nodded, determined. We're going to get to the bottom of this. I promise. As quickly as she had appeared, the mystery woman vanished into the crowd. Guests scattered, calling out, trying to find her, but she was gone. My perfect day had turned into a nightmare. Questions swirled in my mind. Who was that woman? Why would Catherine do this? Was my whole life a lie? Lisa approached me, tears streaming down her face. Honey, I don't know what's happening, but you have to believe me. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. This has to be some kind of horrible mistake. I need some air, I mumbled, pushing through the crowd. As I stumbled outside, I heard Catherine's voice behind me, soft but cutting. The truth always comes out, dear. Always. The days following the wedding disaster were a blur. I postponed the reception indefinitely and holed up in my apartment with John. The constant flood of calls and messages was overwhelming. Amanda, John said gently one morning, we need to talk about what happened. I sighed, running a hand through my unwashed hair. What's there to talk about? My grandmother apparently thinks I'm adopted and hired some actress to ruin our wedding. Just another Tuesday, right? John didn't laugh. This is serious, Amanda. We need to get to the bottom of this. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Megan. Amanda, you won't believe what Stephen and I found. Can we come over? 20 minutes later, Megan and Stephen arrived at my place, looking exhausted. Okay, spill it, I demanded. Stephen leaned forward, eyes intense. We did some digging. Turns out Catherine's been making regular donations to a local theater group for the past 6 months. Megan jumped in, and get this, one payment from her account went to an actress named Claire. The amount and timing line up perfectly with the wedding fiasco. My head spun. Are you saying Catherine hired an actress to pretend to be my mother? But why? That's what we need to find out, John said, squeezing my hand. I knew what I had to do. I called Catherine and demanded she come over. When she arrived, her face was a mask of innocence. Grandma, we know about the actress. Why did you do this? Catherine's eyes hardened. I did what I had to do. You deserve to know the truth about your origins. What truth? There is no truth. You made this all up. Catherine shook her head. You were adopted, Amanda. I've always known. Just then, my mom burst into the room. That's enough, Catherine. I've kept quiet about your manipulations for years, but this ends now. What followed was a revelation that shattered my world. My mom, Lisa, unleashed years of pent-up frustration, detailing how Catherine had always tried to control and sabotage our lives. She's even gone as far as sabotaging your college application so you'd stay close to home, Lisa revealed, voice shaking. I felt like I was drowning. Is that true? I demanded. Catherine's silence was all the confirmation I needed. The next few days were a whirlwind. John and I barely spoke, the weight of everything straining our relationship. I threw myself into uncovering the truth, determined to end this nightmare. During a late-night search through old boxes, I found it, a dusty folder containing my birth records. There, in black and white, was proof that Lisa was indeed my biological mother. With shaking hands, I called Megan. I found the proof. Catherine's been lying this whole time. Megan's voice was filled with relief. Thank God. But Amanda, there's more. We found out Catherine's been interfering in your life for years. Remember Michael from college? She paid him to break up with you. The revelations kept coming. Catherine had meddled in nearly every aspect of my life, always under the guise of protecting me. Armed with the truth, I confronted her one last time. Why, Grandma? Why would you do all this? Catherine's composed facade finally cracked. I was trying to protect you from making the same mistakes your mother did. I thought if I controlled everything, you'd have the perfect life. Tears streamed down my face. But it wasn't your life to control. You've hurt so many people, including yourself. As I left Catherine's house that day, a heavy weight lifted from my shoulders. The truth was out. Painful as it was, now came the hard part. Rebuilding my life and relationships in the aftermath of Catherine's web of lies. I decided to call a family meeting, my heart pounding as everyone gathered in our living room. John squeezed my hand reassuringly as I stood to address the room. I've asked you all here because it's time for the truth to come out. I began, my voice trembling slightly. Catherine has been deceiving all of us for years. I laid out everything. The hired actress, the sabotaged college applications, the manipulated relationships. With each revelation, gasps and murmurs filled the room. Catherine, seated in the corner, finally spoke. Now, Amanda, you're blowing this out of proportion. I only ever wanted what was best for you. My Uncle Tom stood up, his face flushed with anger. Best for her. Catherine, you've been manipulating this family for decades. Remember when you convinced me Sarah was cheating? You nearly ruined my marriage. I took a deep breath and made my decision clear. I'm cutting all ties with Catherine. I'm filing for a restraining order, and I suggest you all consider your relationships with her carefully. Catherine's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful child. After everything I've done for you. That's enough, Mom, my father interrupted, his voice stern. Lisa and I are considering legal action for the emotional distress you've caused our family. 1 year later, I sat in my office admiring a photo of John and me on our wedding day. My event planning business was thriving, and our marriage was stronger than ever. My phone buzzed, and it was Stephen. Amanda, you're not going to believe this, he said. Catherine's been arrested for financial fraud. Looks like she was running a Ponzi scheme through her charity work. I let out a long, relieved breath. Wow, I guess karma finally caught up with her. After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past year. The pain Catherine caused was still there, a dull ache that might never fully heal, but I felt stronger, more resilient. I thought about the little girl I used to be, always seeking Catherine's approval, and I wished I could tell her that everything would be okay. That she would find the strength to break free from toxic influence and build a life filled with genuine love and trust. A knock at my office door pulled me from my thoughts. It was John, grinning widely. Ready for lunch, Mrs. Event Planner Extraordinaire? I smiled, grabbing my bag. As we walked out, hand in hand, I realized that despite everything, or perhaps because of it, I had never felt more like myself. The future stretched out before us, bright and full of possibility, free from the shadows of the past. The story of Amanda and Catherine's manipulations had come to an end. Now, I have a question for you. If you discovered a family member had been manipulating your life for years, would you cut ties completely or try to forgive them? What would it take for you to consider rebuilding that relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hey there, I'm Elizabeth. I'm 45, a single mom, and a high school teacher. Life's been a roller coaster, but I've always managed to keep things together. My daughter Hazel is 22 now, studying business in college. I swear, it feels like just yesterday she was learning to ride a bike. Mom, I need new textbooks. They're so expensive this semester, Hazel said, giving me that look she knows I can't resist. I sighed, checking my bank balance on my phone. Honey, I'll figure it out. Maybe we can find some used ones. But Mom, everyone else has the new editions. I'll be so behind. Lately, this kind of conversation has been a weekly thing. Don't get me wrong, I'd do anything for her, but it's getting harder to keep up with her demands. The other day, my best friend Lisa came over for coffee. Elizabeth, have you seen Hazel's new Instagram posts? Girls living large, she said, showing me her phone. I nearly choked on my coffee. Hazel was decked out in designer clothes, partying at a fancy club. My stomach dropped. Where's she getting the money for all this? Lisa asked. I shook my head. I don't know. Maybe her new boyfriend. Speaking of the boyfriend, John, met him once and got bad vibes immediately. Hazel used to tell me everything, but now it's like pulling teeth just to get her to say hello. At work, my colleague Mike noticed my distraction. Elizabeth, you okay? I forced a smile. Just parent stuff. Mike's a good guy, always there with a dad joke or a shoulder to lean on. Sometimes I wonder if there could be something more, but with everything going on with Hazel, dating is the last thing on my mind. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Mrs. Thompson. This is Karen from Midwest Bank. We're calling about the missed payments on your loan. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, what loan? The personal loan for $50,000 you took out 3 months ago. You've missed the last 2 payments. I felt like I was going to pass out. There must be some mistake. I never took out a loan. Ma'am, we have the documents here with your signature. If you can't make the payments, we'll have to discuss default options. The room started spinning. A loan I never took, my signature. There was only one person I could think of. I hung up, my hands shaking. How could this be happening? I've always tried to do right by Hazel, to give her everything she needed. And now, this. The next morning, I marched into the bank, demanding answers. The teller handed me copies of the loan documents, and my heart sank. There it was, my signature. Perfect, down to every detail. But I had never signed it. Ma'am, are you all right? The teller asked, noticing my pale face. No, I'm not. This isn't my signature. I left the bank in a daze, clutching those damning papers. Back home, I waited for Hazel, my mind racing. When she finally walked in, I couldn't hold back. Hazel, did you forge my signature for a loan? She froze, eyes wide. What? Mom, that's crazy. Why would you even think that? Don't lie to me. The bank called. They have documents with my signature, but I never signed anything. Hazel's face crumpled and she burst into tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. My world shattered. How could you do this? Do you realize what you've done? Through sobs, Hazel confessed. The partying, the shopping sprees, even gambling. It was like I didn't know my own daughter anymore. I'll fix it, Mom, I promise. Just don't tell anyone, please. I was torn. This was my baby girl, but what she'd done was criminal. Hazel, this isn't something you can just fix. We're talking about fraud. She grabbed my hands, pleading. Mom, please, I'll get a job. I'll pay it back. Don't ruin my life over one mistake. One mistake? This was a calculated series of actions. But looking at her tear-stained face, I wavered. I need time to think, I said, walking away. I called Lisa, my voice shaking. Can you come over? It's bad. Lisa arrived in record time, and I spilled everything. Elizabeth, honey, you have to report this. This isn't just about the money. She committed a crime. But she's my daughter. How can I turn her in? And what happens when they come after you for the money? You could lose everything. She was right, but the thought of Hazel in handcuffs made me sick. The next day at work, I was a mess. Mike cornered me in the teacher's lounge. Elizabeth, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in days. I broke down, telling him everything. His face hardened. Elizabeth, I know she's your daughter, but you can't protect her from this. She needs to face the consequences. I nodded, knowing what I had to do. That evening, I sat Hazel down. This is your last chance. Tell me everything, and we'll figure out how to make this right. Hazel's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Oh, Mom, thank you. I promise I'll fix everything. We spent hours going over her spending, the full extent of the loan, everything. It was worse than I thought, but Hazel seemed genuinely remorseful, promising to get a job and pay it all back. I'll start looking for work tomorrow, she said, hugging me tightly. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But something in my gut told me this wasn't over. The next morning, Hazel was gone. Her room was empty, closet cleared out. On her bed was a note. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't face this. I love you. I collapsed to the floor, the note crumpling in my fists. My own daughter had run away, leaving me to face the mess she'd made. Sitting there, surrounded by the remnants of Hazel's life, I realized the true betrayal wasn't just the forced loan, it was the shattering of trust between a mother and daughter. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone, knowing the call I was about to make would change everything. But I had no choice. It was time to face the music, even if it meant losing my daughter in the process. I was in the middle of teaching algebra when it happened. The classroom door burst open, and two officers walked in. Elizabeth Thompson. Yes, that's me. What's going on? You're under arrest for fraud and identity theft. The students gasped. I felt the blood drain from my face as they cuffed me right there in front of everyone. The walk through the school corridors was excruciating. Colleagues stared, some in disbelief, others in judgment. The jail cell was cold and lonely. I sat there, replaying every moment with Hazel, wondering where I went wrong. The betrayal cut deep, leaving me raw and broken. Elizabeth, you've got a visitor. It was Mike, looking worried but determined. I've hired a lawyer for you. We're going to fight this. Mike, I can't afford. Don't worry about that now. We need to get you out of here. The investigation was brutal. They dug into every aspect of my life, revealing things about Hazel I never knew. Casino receipts, maxed out credit cards, a trail of lies that made me sick to my stomach. Your daughter has a serious gambling problem, Mrs. Thompson, the detective said, his voice cold. I lost my job, 20 years of teaching gone in an instant. The school board couldn't risk the scandal. Lisa was my rock through it all. She took care of my house, gathered evidence, and kept me sane during those long nights in jail. We'll get through this, Elizabeth, I promise. But Hazel and her boyfriend, John, had vanished, no calls, no messages. I was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. One night, lying on the hard jail cot, I hit rock bottom. I cried until I had no tears left, wondering if I failed as a mother, if this was all my fault. Then, a breakthrough. Security footage from a bank showed Hazel, clear as day, forging my signature. It was the evidence we needed. The day I was released, reporters swarmed me, cameras flashed, questions flew. My reputation was in tatters, but I was free. It was time to rebuild. Starting over at 45 isn't easy. I took whatever jobs I could find. Waitressing, tutoring, even walking dogs. More coffee, hon? I'd ask, swallowing my pride as I refilled cups at the local diner. Slowly, the truth spread. People who had judged me began to see the real story. Old colleagues reached out, offering support and apologies. We were wrong about you, Elizabeth. We're sorry. Then came the news that changed everything. Hazel and John were caught at the Canadian border with fake passports. The prosecutor called, asking if I wanted to press charges. It was the hardest decision of my life. I'm sorry, but I can't protect her anymore. She needs to face the consequences. The trial was a media circus. Hazel pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then, in a shocking twist, John turned on her. He claimed it was all Hazel's idea, saying she believed her mom would never turn her in. Hazel's face crumpled, betrayed by the very person she had chosen over me. The judge's gavel came down hard. Hazel, 5 years. John, 18 months with a plea deal. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, facing my daughter for the first time in months. Hazel, I love you. I always will. But love doesn't mean enabling destruction. You broke my heart, shattered my trust, and nearly ruined my life. I hope you find help and peace, but I can't be part of that journey. Goodbye, Hazel. I walked out of the courtroom, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. 1 year later, life looks different. I started a support group for parents like me, turning pain into purpose. After a lengthy review, the school board reinstated me with a public apology. Lisa and I meet for coffee every week, our bond stronger than ever. And Mike? Let's just say second chances aren't just for careers. Ready for dinner? Mike asks, taking my hand. Almost. Just got some news. Hazel's appeal was denied. I feel a twinge of sadness, but mostly relief. As we walk out, I realize I'm finally at peace. I've learned to prioritize my own well-being and surround myself with genuine love and support. Life threw me one hell of a curveball, but I'm still standing, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next. The toxic people in my life are gone, and I've found my own kind of justice, the peace that comes from letting go and moving forward. The story you've just heard is over, but the conversation is just beginning. So now, I want to ask you something that cuts to the heart of this tale. If you were in my shoes, would you have turned your own child in, knowing it could mean years in prison? Or would you have tried to protect them, even at the cost of your own freedom and reputation? It's not an easy question, is it? Hazel is my daughter, my flesh and blood. The instinct to protect your child is one of the strongest forces we have as parents. But on the other hand, her actions were deliberate, repeated, and caused immense harm. She betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. What do you think is the right thing to do in a situation like this? Where do we draw the line between parental love and personal responsibility? Is there a point where tough love becomes the only way forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.